When writing an action-filled light novel, you may stumble across the part where you need to write a battle scene. Battle scenes can be one of the most difficult parts to write because it not only involves balancing a character's actions, but it also involves the character's dialogue and their thoughts during the process. In today's video, I want to take you step by step through the process of writing a battle scene in a light novel, and how to apply those tips into writing a really exciting and intense battle scene. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video, and I can't wait to share these tips and ideas with you. So first of all, what sets apart a light novel from a regular novel? Light novels are a popular form of novel in Japan, which are shorter than regular novels. A regular light novel might have around 50,000 words, for example. But there's also a difference in the style of writing as well. Usually light novels are more character-focused and focus more on the characters' thoughts and their dialogue. Sentences also tend to be shorter and more simplified. This kind of thought process with the writing style needs to be considered when writing battle scenes as well. They shouldn't be too complicated, but they should also have enough information to provide the reader with enough knowledge to know what is happening and what action the characters are taking. So first of all, it's really important to know the point of view. Some of the most commonly used point of views in stories are first person, second person, and third person. The point of view refers to how you are telling a story and who the story is revolving around. So basically, before you begin writing your battle scene in your light novel, you need to understand the point of view and who the scene is focusing on. This can really change the way you write your battle scene and can also change who you're focusing on. So it's important that before you begin writing it, understand the point of view in your story and who the scene is revolving around. As a second point of advice, I also recommend you understand your characters well and how they might respond to difficult situations. Every character might respond to a battle scene situation in a very different way depending on their personality. Some characters might jump straight into the battle and be really determined to fight. Other characters might be more hesitant or even scared about doing that. Understand your characters and how they might respond to these situations. My first piece of advice is to go back and forth in the battle scene as if the characters are playing a game of table tennis. It needs to go back and forth. In one instance, you need to be focusing on your character, and then in the other instance, you need to focus on the opponent. You need to give both characters their moments to shine and their moments to fight during the battle scene. In this way, it keeps the battle scene going and it gives the battle scene momentum. Another thing I also really like to do when writing battle scenes is I like to show the results of the action more than the action itself. When writing a battle scene, you could say something like, character A slashed with the sword. However, that shows what character A is doing and not necessarily what the result of that action is. In order to make the battle scene feel more intense and to keep the intensity of the scene, it's more effective to show what happens because of the character's action. So when character A slashes with the sword, what happens? You might be better to say, the opponent recoiled at the slash of character A's sword. And that sounds more intense. It shows that the other character is responding to the situation and responding to what character A is doing. Of course, you don't have to do this all the time. If you did it all the time, it might make the scenes feel a bit too wordy. But if you use this technique at moments throughout your battle scene, it can help to build the intensity of the scene. I also recommend that you focus on the thoughts of your character during the battle scene. It can be very helpful to get into the mind and the role of your character and think about what they might be thinking about or feeling in the midst of this battle. They might be thinking about their next move or thinking about someone that they might be worried about during the battle. Getting inside the mind of your character can help you to see the scene from their perspective and understand your characters a lot better. When writing the battle scene, it can also help the scene feel a lot more compelling when you include your character's senses in the scene. When writing a battle scene, I also really recommend focusing on your character's 5 senses during the scene. It can help to show what your character is experiencing in the midst of the battle and how they might be responding to certain situations that are happening around them. or things that might be happening to themselves. When writing about their movements during the battle scene, don't only focus on the way they are moving, but also why they are moving. This is another way to make the scene feel more believable and realistic. So using these points I've mentioned in today's video, I'd now like to read you an example that I've already written of a light novel battle scene. Yukari could hear the pounding footsteps of the approaching beast. Her breath caught in her throat as she pulled out the sword, now cold and lifeless in her hands. She could run. She thought about it. But as the footsteps pounded up the stone steps, she knew that running was no longer an option. Further up the dungeon, her friends were waiting. Her friends were safe. But they wouldn't be safe if she left like a coward. So instead, she stayed. And she tried to be brave. She could be brave. The beast leapt out of the shadows at her, and she barely had time to register the movement. The dull sword clanged against its bloody great axe. The sword was embarrassingly weak, and could hardly be used to defend her, let alone actually fight back. She would be destroyed if she couldn't wake it up somehow. She tried desperately to think of the command. "Wake up," she shouted. "Transform. Attack." No matter what she shouted, the sword would not respond. The beast grabbed her left shoulder, and she cried out as it popped from its socket. "Ow!" she screamed, clutching at her now useless arm. At her protest, the sword came to life. It pulsed for a moment before turning a bright blue, the color of sapphire. When the beast lunged again, this time she was prepared. The sword seemed to have a mind of its own as she slashed towards his outstretched arm. The beast howled as she cut through, but it did not give up, and neither did she. Feeling a new strength she did not have before, she managed to dodge its attacks, letting the sword in her right hand guide her into the fray. The pain in her left arm was a dull ache as her mind filled with the scent of battle. When the beast lay still and motionless before her, she finally let out a shaky breath. She had survived. Again. The sword remained glowing. At least now she knew how to awaken it. She sighed, about to put it back into its sheath, when a glowing form passed through the wall and over towards the still form of the beast. After taking a moment, seemingly to analyze the monster, it then approached Yukari. She watched, breathless, as the glowing shape came into view. "So it's you." The fairy peered at her with eyes too wide. "You passed the test." "Test?" "Yes, a test," the fairy replied, furiously nodding its head. "If you come with me, I'll give you your reward." "That sounds awfully like a trap," Yukari muttered. "It's not a trap. Look." The fairy pointed at the glowing sword. "The very fact you could awaken Rillian indicates that you're stronger than you seem." The fairy continued to peer closer at Yukari, as if silently judging her. If I couldn't awaken it, then why would I have come into this dungeon in the first place?" Yukari replied defensively. I just couldn't remember the right command before." The fairy snickered. "Oh, you didn't awaken the sword by accident," the fairy replied with a smug grin. "The sword only chooses to awaken when the right person is holding it, when it can see into a person's heart and know that that person is worthy." The fairy leaned closer. "It's not the sword's power that saved you. Your own power saved yourself." So now that I've read you my own example, let's go through and talk about some of these highlighted points that I mentioned in the previous tips to help you understand how these tips can work in action. Here are some examples showing the back and forth of a battle scene, like table tennis. The beast leapt out of the shadows at her, and she barely had time to register the movement. The dull sword clanged against its bloody great axe. When the beast lunged again, this time she was prepared. The sword seemed to have a mind of its own as she slashed towards its outstretched arm. In this example, there's another back and forth, with the beast character lunging towards Yukari, and then Yukari also coming forward. Now in these examples, it shows more of the results of the action more than the action itself. The beast howled as she cut through. It shows how the beast is responding to a certain situation. Here are some more examples of this in action. Next, I want to show you some examples of showing the senses during a battle scene. In this part here, we have Yukari could hear the pounding footsteps of the approaching beast. That shows Yukari's hearing, and it shows how she's responding to hearing the beast coming up the stairs. In this part, the pain in her left arm was a dull ache as her mind filled with the scent of battle. I used scent of battle as a kind of way to show her senses as well. Even though it's not necessarily an actual smell in the scene, it does help the readers to kind of put themselves in that situation. There's also a number of times in the scene where I show the thoughts of the character as well. Such as this point here, where she's saying she could run and she thought about it, but she knew that running was no longer an option. And also the part where she thinks about her friends further up in the dungeon. Her friends were waiting and her friends were safe, but they wouldn't be safe if she left like a coward. I've also highlighted a few examples where it shows why the character is moving and why they are making certain decisions. Such as this point here where she thinks she would be destroyed if she couldn't wake it up somehow. Or this part here with, but it did not give up and neither did she. These indicate that she didn't really have a choice in the battle scene. She had to fight back, or she would not survive the battle scene. Battle scenes are a really important part of writing a good light novel, and you will notice in action-filled light novels, the battle scenes will be one of the most important and memorable parts. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video where we went over these different examples of how to write a battle scene and also looked at today's example of writing a battle scene. I had so much fun writing this example and sharing it with you. Please let me know what battle scenes you enjoy in light novels you've read or anime you've seen, because I would love to hear your thoughts. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day and I will see you in the next video. Bye!